This is Nightly Business Report with Bill Griffith and Sue Herrera.
Huge recall. Chrysler recalls nearly 5 million vehicles. The stock falls, and it comes at the start of a busy holiday weekend on the road.
A matter of trust. Amazon's Alexa recorded and shared a couple's conversation, raising privacy concerns about the growing smart device market.
Airbnb, unwelcome guests, an investigative report inside the world of illegal short-term rentals, and the tense battle with regulators. Those stories and more tonight on Nightly Business Report for Friday, May 25th.
And we do bid you a good Friday evening, everybody. Welcome. The timing could not be worse for Fiat Chrysler. Ahead of a long weekend when millions of Americans are expected to hit the road, the automaker issued one of the largest recalls in American automotive history today. The company is warning owners to stop using their cruise control immediately because of a software defect in nearly 5 million vehicles, and that sent the stock lower in trading today. And as Phil LeBeau reports right now, the recall also occurs just as the industry kicks off its summer selling season.
It is one of the largest recalls ever, impacting some of the most popular models in the U.S., including the Jeep Grand Cherokee and the Ram 1500 pickup. They are part of a recall covering 4.8 million Fiat Chrysler vehicles, 15 different models covering the last 5 model years, with Jeep, Ram, Dodge, and Chrysler brands all impacted. The issue? A defect with the cruise control. In rare circumstances, drivers may not be able to turn off the cruise control unless they shift the vehicle into neutral and eventually park it. While Fiat Chrysler knows of no accidents or incidents with runaway cruise control, it is warning drivers not to use cruise control until the software can be updated. That warning comes as millions prepare for a road trip over the holiday weekend. It's also a huge weekend for people to buy a new car or truck. Whether the recall and headlines impact sales is too hard to tell. Under CEO Sergio Marchionne, Fiat Chrysler has more than doubled its U.S. sales in the last decade. Jeep and Ram have become hot brands with strong sales. But overall, Fiat Chrysler's track record in reliability and dependability studies has been lackluster. It's unclear how long it will take Fiat Chrysler to get the updated cruise control software to dealers and fix all of the recalled vehicles. But until the defect is corrected, drivers are being told to steer clear of cruise control. Phil LeBeau, Nightly Business Report, Chicago.
And as drivers hit the road this weekend, they're also paying more for gas. A rise in crude oil prices and increased demand for gasoline has lifted the national average to nearly $3 a gallon. According to AAA, that's up about 30% from a year ago.
And wouldn't you know that oil prices went in the other direction today? 2 influential energy ministers said that some oil-producing nations could soon begin to ease production limits that were put in place last year. Officials in Saudi Arabia and Russia say that there is a need to compensate for declining production in Venezuela and the anticipated export disruption from Iran. So the price of domestic crude settled lower by 4% today.
On Wall Street, energy stocks followed oil prices lower. Exxon and Chevron were the 2 worst-performing stocks on the Dow today, and geopolitical risk kept investors cautious ahead of the long weekend. The Dow Jones Industrial Average fell 58 points to 24,753. The Nasdaq was up 9, and the S&P 500 dropped 6. And for the week, all of the averages recorded gains. Mike Santoli takes a look at what might happen to stocks in the weeks ahead.
Stocks are heading into summer stuck right in the middle of their 2018 range. And a swirl of opposing currents threatens to keep the market from making much progress as the weather heats up and the trading slows down. The S&P 500 has had an eventful first 5 months of the year, but the net movement has been slight. The index is up a bit less than 2% year to date and is almost exactly halfway between its late January peak and the February lows, just a bit more than 5% away from each extreme. Seasonal factors suggest a choppy path into the summer, with June being among the weaker months of the year. The historical record of midterm election years also points to nervous back-and-forth trading in the coming months. This would fit with the interplay of fundamental factors that have been driving stocks so far this year. Corporate profits are growing briskly, and companies are buying back their shares aggressively. Yet the threat of higher interest rates and questions over the durability of economic growth are constants. And while Wall Street has managed to tune out much of the drama from Washington, the jarring headlines on geopolitical flux, trade tensions, the Russia collusion investigation, and a contentious congressional campaign might only become more intense. None of this suggests stocks are doomed to a summer of discontent. The market's winter setback and springtime recovery acted as a sort of stress test to make stocks less expensive and turn investor expectations more realistic. But the forces that have held the market in check for months continue to indicate that stocks might be in for a staycation, at least for the start of summer. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Mike Santoli.
To the economy now, where orders for durable goods, those long-lasting items like computers and refrigerators, those orders fell last month, but much of that decline stemmed from fewer contracts for Boeing planes. Otherwise, most businesses did report a modest improvement in equipment spending in April and, again, an overall rise in orders.
The Trump administration has reportedly reached a deal that will allow the Chinese telecom company ZTE to remain in business. As first reported by the New York Times, the White House told Congress that ZTE will pay a bigger fine, hire American compliance officers, and shake up its management team. And in exchange, the Commerce Department will lift an order under which that company had been cut off from American suppliers. It is unclear, however, how firm the reported deal is at this point.
Elsewhere, President Trump said today that the summit with North Korea is still possible, less than 24 hours after he sent a letter to Pyongyang canceling next month's talks. The president said that the two countries are talking again, and he seemed to like the conciliatory tone of a statement issued by North Korea offering to meet any time. So what's next? Eunice Yoon picks up the story from there, from Beijing tonight.
North Korea left the door ajar on rescheduling a summit. In a statement in the official KCNA news agency, the North Koreans described President Trump's decision as unexpected and said, "We are willing to sit face to face to resolve problems at any time, in any way." I spoke to one diplomat here who follows North Korea, who said that the language of the statement suggested that it came directly from Kim Jong-un. It used the words "upon authorization," which is code for Kim. He said the two are like a husband and wife who just got into an argument, and we're waiting to see who's going to make the first move to kiss and make up. There are a few things, though, that don't bode well for the optimists. The North Koreans said that solving the nuclear problem in a phased way would make the relations get better rather than making them get worse. This is not new, but it shows how North Korea wants to approach the nuclear issue in a step-by-step process. That happens to be very different from what the Trump administration wants, a front-loaded, verifiable denuclearization with major promises of economic relief. This is where the two are very far apart on how the process will work. On top of that, North Korea said Trump's decision has caused them to think over if they were truly right to have made efforts and opted for this new path. That raises questions as to whether or not North Korea will continue with its general outreach to the United States and South Korea. There are also some interesting comments out of China. The Foreign Ministry reiterated today that the two sides should continue with their dialogue, but the more interesting comments were in response to questions about President Trump's implied accusation that China is behind North Korea's more hostile attitude. To this, the ministry said, "We have no secret intention." And the ministry also dismissed the suggestion that China could use its relationship with North Korea as leverage in trade talks with the United States, saying, "I would say you are overthinking it." For Nightly Business Report, I'm Eunice Yoon in Beijing.
It is time to take a look at some of today's upgrades and downgrades. PayPal's rating was upgraded to buy from hold at Stifel Nicolaus. The analyst there cites its addition of new financial services and the growing global payments market. The price target is 99. The shares fell fractionally to $80.96. Colgate-Palmolive's rating was raised to buy from hold over at Argus Research. The analyst cites the potential for earnings growth given its strong focus on emerging markets. The price target is $72. The shares closed up 2% to $63.75.
Still ahead, the area of retail where there is still a lot of growth and where our market monitor says might be a good place to invest.
As we have been reporting, data privacy laws went into effect in the European Union today. It's considered the biggest change to data privacy in 20 years. The rules give EU citizens more control over their personal data. Users will be able to know how their data is being used, and users can also have their data erased. Most analysts say the financial impact on big tech companies will be minimal, although smaller ones could face more of a challenge with increased regulatory expenses. But some American publishers are struggling with the new law. Sites like the LA Times and the Chicago Tribune were taken down in European countries.
And another privacy debate is brewing. You probably have heard about this over Amazon's smart speaker Alexa, which one couple says secretly recorded their conversation and sent it to a random contact. Aditi Roy has the details for us tonight.
Amazon's Alexa devices are in 40 million homes across the country. Their job? To always be listening for voice prompts. But in what Amazon is calling an unlikely chain of events, an Amazon Echo device inside a home of a Portland, Oregon couple accidentally recorded their private conversation and then sent the audio file to a phone contact. The story is unsettling to Echo customers like Alyssa Chu.
That's not what I would intend it to be used for.
I'm pretty surprised. I mean, that sounds like a lot of mistakes to happen.
According to Amazon, Echo woke up due to a word in background conversation sounding like Alexa. Then the subsequent conversation was heard as a send message request, at which point Alexa said out loud, "To whom?" At which point the background conversation was interpreted as a name in the customer's contact list.
I think this will have ramifications for people's trust level for Alexa and other in-home devices. The creepy factor on this is huge.
Amazon's already in a battle for market share in the home speaker category, and some industry watchers say an incident like this could tip the scales. According to eMarketer, Amazon dominates 2/3 of that market now, but the market research group projects that lead will drop by 6% in 2 years, while products including the Google Home will see a corresponding increase.
This is the consumer privacy fear that everyone was afraid of when Alexas came into people's houses.
On the other hand, other analysts say what happened to that Oregon couple is so unlikely that it won't keep people from buying and using their Alexa devices.
I think it should be statistically about 1 in a million concern.
The company says it's working to make sure it doesn't happen again. And despite her disappointment over the incident, Chu says she's not unplugging her Echo anytime soon.
Probably still use it, just being more aware.
The case does bring up privacy concerns. The group Consumer Watchdog is already calling on Amazon to have a dedicated internal privacy watchdog at the company. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Aditi Roy, San Francisco.
A bit earlier this week, we ran a story about Amazon's Alexa teaming up with the home builder Lennar. Lennar issued the following statement following the Alexa privacy story, quote, As with all new technologies, this is a process of continued refinement, including the coexistence of things like security and privacy. That said, we have a lot of respect for Amazon's technology, security, and privacy capabilities. Homeowners can always remove their Alexa-enabled device if they choose, end quote.
Foot Locker raced past earnings expectations, and that is where we begin tonight's market focus. Strong demand for Nike and Adidas shoes helped the retail chain beat sales estimates by the most in at least 2 years. The company also benefited from its strategy to streamline its inventory. Shares soared by 20% to $55.74, making Foot Locker the best performing stock by far in the S&P 500 today. But it was a different story for sporting goods retailer Hibbett Sports. The company missed both earnings and revenue estimates in the most recent quarter. Strong online sales were not enough to offset a decline in comparable store sales. And as you might imagine, shares finished lower, the day down 15% to $24.43. Meanwhile, a drop in same-store sales caused revenue to miss forecasts at clothing retailer Buckle. Net income did rise, and those results beat street targets. Shares, though, fell nearly 2% today to $25.25.
One of AstraZeneca's cancer drugs showed promising results in a study. The pharmaceutical company said its immunotherapy medication improved overall survival in the lung cancer patients who were given that treatment. The drug is already approved in the U.S. to treat a certain type of non-small cell lung cancer. Shares of AstraZeneca were up a fraction to $37.04. Herbalife's largest investor is reducing his position. A securities filing revealed that billionaire investor Carl Icahn is cutting his stake in the nutrition and weight loss company simply because his investment has become too large. Icahn added that he still believes in the business and sees strong performance ahead. Herbalife shares fell 9.5% to $48.70. And a federal court late last night handed Apple a legal victory against its rival Samsung. Samsung has been ordered to pay Apple $500 million in damages for illegally copying patented smartphone features. The two companies have been involved in this patent lawsuit since 2011. Shares of Apple were up a tick to $188.58. Samsung trades in South Korea.
Tonight's Market Monitor says he is finding opportunities in online retail stocks. He expects online retail companies to account for 20% of all U.S. retail sales within 5 years. Right now, that figure sits just below 10%. This is his first time on as our Market Monitor. He is Christian Magoon, founder and CEO of Amplify ETFs. Christian, good to see you again. Thank you for joining us tonight.
Good to see you as well. Thanks.
Now, you see what kind of growth, we're going to talk about three companies here. You see what, 20% by the end of the year. What's going to be the catalyst for those gains, do you think?
Well, most of the catalyst for online retail stocks is really growth in sales and market share, but then overall growth in online retail sales. Right now, online retail sales are growing by about 16% year over year, whereas department store sales are actually shrinking. So they're in a sweet spot where they're carving out market share from brick and mortar, but also increasing their customer penetration rate.
And you point out that it's not just Amazon. A lot of people think of online shopping as simply, they always go to Amazon, but you picked three stocks that you think are very interesting niche plays. Etsy is your first pick. Why do you like it?
Yeah, so this is an online platform for handmade and vintage goods. We think it's a very unique platform to buy things that really have kind of an experience with them. They're not just something you'd find in a typical brick and mortar store. They're very unique. And this could be an interesting play for a merger or an acquisition, whether it's a brick and mortar company trying to get their toe wet in online retail and buying a platform like Etsy, or somebody already in the online retail space trying to expand into this handmade and vintage item area.
Then there's a company in a very competitive part of the online world in food and meal delivery. You're talking about Grubhub here.
Yeah, Grubhub is definitely in competition with companies like Uber Eats, for example, but they have some strategic advantages. One is this recent exclusive deal they signed with Yum Brands to exclusively deliver KFC, Pizza Hut, Taco Bell, etc. They're becoming kind of the largest entity in the U.S., but it's a competitive space it's a competitive space bill, and I'd be interested to see kind of what happens in this marketplace. But we see it going higher over the course of the year.
And let's finish up with Carvana. I was really stunned at the amount of revenue growth that this company has come in with, up 127% year over year. That's obviously one of the reasons why you like it.
That's right. It goes hand in hand with their car sales. So they sold over 18,000 cars, pre-owned cars last quarter. That was a growth of about 127% year over year. They're building this online platform to buy, inspect, finance pre-owned cars, and that's becoming a growing area here in the U.S. They're national, and we think they can continue to improve. Their big challenge is they're still not profitable yet, unlike the other two stocks that we spoke about.
Well, that's certainly a big growth area, that's for sure, in online retail. Christian, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Bill.
Christian Magoon with Amplify ETFs. And to read more about his picks, you can head to our website at nbr.com.
Coming up, a months-long exclusive investigation into the emerging battle between illegal short-term rentals and the law.
Here is what to watch next week on Wednesday. The second estimate for first quarter GDP will be out Also on Wednesday, the Fed will publish its Beige Book, the anecdotal look at the economic conditions across the country. And then on Friday, the all-important jobs report for the month of May will be on tap first thing in the morning. That's what we're watching for next week.
An emerging turf battle is underway between cities and upstart tech companies like Airbnb, for example, that have been capitalizing on the Wild West landscape of the share economy. Valued at $31 billion, the company is currently worth more than most of its publicly traded hotel rivals. But gigantic growth means some big growing pains as well.
Indeed. Airbnb unwelcome guests. That's a CNBC investigation into that clash between illegal short-term rentals and restrictive regulations. Airbnb says it has worked with cities around the world to craft reasonable regulations, but not in Miami Beach, where the fight has no end in sight. Morgan Brennan has our special report for us tonight.
It's 9 o'clock on a Saturday night, and we're riding along with Miami Beach code compliance, on the lookout for illegal short-term rentals.
And what are you looking for tonight?
Hopefully we can establish contact if it's occupied and determine whether it's a violation or not.
Code Compliance Officer Vijma Maharaj has seen it all. Large, noisy late-night parties in residential neighborhoods. Commercial video shoots with scantily clad women in a home investigated for short-term rental complaints.
I'm with the City of Miami Beach Code Compliance.
And unwitting tourists who say they unknowingly booked Airbnbs in prohibited areas.
You shouldn't be able to do this. This is messed up.
All captured on body camera videos recorded over the past 2 years.
Hello.
Some are so blatant, as these house rules show, what to do if someone asks. They're told to lie by saying they're a friend, and certainly don't mention they rent this place.
You're not allowed to rent this house for less than 6 months and 1 day.
Everybody has to leave.
This party needs to clear up.
At a loud party in Millbrae, California, in the San Francisco Bay Area, shots rang out. Guests seen on surveillance cameras running down the street. Airbnb says it has zero tolerance for this type of behavior and permanently banned the guest. Airbnb says these incidents don't represent the overwhelming number of satisfied hosts and guests in 81,000 cities and 191 countries, and it has successfully worked with lawmakers around the world. Back on the streets of Miami Beach, it's not long before we roll up on a group of vacationers. The building has telltale signs of an illegal rental. 2 of the units advertised on Airbnb have lock boxes and keypads.
Do you live there?
We do.
How long have you been living there?
We're actually just rented the Airbnb.
Are you guys surprised to hear that it's not legal here?
Actually, yeah, because I mean, it's something that's, it's just out there for people.
And you would say, when you hear that story...
To Miami Beach Mayor Dan Gelber, the issue is clear-cut.
They may work in some places, but they don't really work here. Because at the end of the day, it's not the mom and pops that we're seeing here. We're seeing commercialized, predatory companies that are trying to commercialize our residential communities.
Predatory seems like a really strong word. What do you mean by that?
It is predatory because it's not about a mom and pop or a grandmother wanting to bring in a college kid to make them chicken soup at night. It's people taking very nice properties, buying them, and turning them into essentially a flop house.
Gelber, a former prosecutor and Florida state lawmaker, says Airbnb and other home-sharing platforms must abide by the law.
Have you spoken to Airbnb or any of the other companies that operate here?
I've spoken to some of the representatives before I was elected. I'd like to send them a message. I'd like them to be corporately responsible. I'd like them to do the right thing.
Why do you think they haven't done that?
Look, these are not charities. These home-sharing platforms, they want to make money.
In an interview at Airbnb's San Francisco headquarters, Chris Lehane, the head of global policy, strongly defended the company's track record.
I've yet to see a program being run by any mayor, any elected official, that in this time of economic inequality is generating $6,100 for a typical middle-class family, all without the expenditure of a single taxpayer dollar. That is what Airbnb is about at its core, trying to use technology to create economic empowerment.
Should Airbnb be responsible for what is, in that market, illegal activity on the platform?
I think what seems to me that would be a common sense solution from Miami Beach, happy to do this if they actually really want to sit down and have a constructive conversation, is you could take that 35% of the city that's a residential area, make that an exclusionary zone. Allow the activity to be able to take place in the 65% of the city that's actually explicitly zoned for this type of activity.
In the meantime, you have illegal listings on your site.
Well, first of all, I think if you actually look at the underlying law in the city, in Miami Beach, right? The Miami Beach allows for this activity to take place. $20,000 fines on someone making their home available a few times a year to actually help make ends meet. Does the city actually want to make this work as well as possible for as many people as possible?
The American Hotel and Lodging Association tells us that instead of supporting common sense regulations, Airbnb has opted to deploy a massive obstruction campaign of dirty tactics, deceptive messaging, and personal attacks against anyone who raises a concern. For Nightly Business Report, I'm Morgan Brennan.
Whether it is Airbnb or Booking.com or HomeAway, which is owned by Expedia, all of these companies have had clashes to varying degrees with regulators in different cities. Officials in many cities across the country, whether it's Boston or Los Angeles or New York, say there are issues. That said, Morgan found in her reporting the company brought up most frequently is Airbnb.
Before we go, one more look at the day on Wall Street. The Dow fell 58 points today. The Nasdaq was up 9. The S&P dropped by 6. And for the week, all of the averages recorded gains.
And that is Nightly Business Report for tonight. I'm Sue Herrera. Thanks for joining us.
I'm Bill Griffith. Have a wonderful long weekend. We will see you Monday for a special edition of NBR, but have a good night.